process we go through is we'll start with some breathing exercises. When it comes to your core, we have the inner layer and the outer layer. The inner layer sort of is your diaphragm, your pelvic floor, your transverse abdominis. The muscles in there are what we call anticipatory. So they will actually fire before we move. So before I even know I'm going to move, they're already on. It's kind of a weird thing to understand, but they generally never really switch off. However, some people really struggle to have that sort of sequence pattern in the right order. So it's really important, because if you don't have that working, everything else from there is going to be a bit scratchy. So we focus on some breathing. Breathing can really reset your sequencing pattern. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to do 2 exercises. We'll definitely do 1. And since you just did a workout, you're going to find this really quite calming and relaxing. And when it comes to breathing, I could probably spend a whole hour just talking to you guys on breathing. I've got to cut it a bit short. But just understand that what we want to focus on is small, soft, quiet kind of breathing throughout the day, which generally involves just your nose. So in and out, just through your nose. Our nose was designed for breathing, our mouth was designed for eating. Our nose will humidify the air. Our nose will basically act as a filtration system. Our nose will get the air down into our lungs. It perfects because it makes it moist and warm. It means that when the air gets to your lungs, it's in the perfect condition for chemical exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide. But our nose will also not let out too much CO2, and that's really important here. That's the only thing I'm going to really talk about when it comes to breathing before we do the drill, and that's the importance of carbon dioxide. There's oxygen in our blood, and there's oxygen in our tissues. The oxygen in our blood is always about 95 to 99% saturated. Taking a deep breath like that will not saturate your blood anymore. It's already pretty much fully oxygenated. What we need to do is get the blood from the oxygen from the blood and get it to our tissues that are craving for it. They're craving for it right now. And that's why we're going to do this little drill, because the sooner you can bring your heart rate down and reset your breathing levels, the sooner you're going to start adapting. And the quicker you start adapting, the quicker you're going to have a response to your stimulus, which is your training. Now, how do we get the oxygen from our blood to our tissues? That's where the CO2 comes in. You need to have a decent amount of CO2 in your blood for the blood to let go of the oxygen. See, oxygen wants to bind to your blood, and if you don't have any CO2, there's nothing there to sort of push it off the blood. So it's going to stay in your blood. So when you guys are working out and you're starting to get into your anaerobic stage, you're starting to breathe through your mouth and stuff, you're breathing out a lot of CO2, and you're actually stopping the oxygen in your blood getting to your muscles. So you're kind of doing the opposite to what you should be doing, because you think you need more air, which you do because you're working hard, but the air isn't actually getting to the tissues. It's just going and cycling through your lungs and your blood, but not actually getting to the tissues. And that's where we want to build up our CO2 tolerance. Number of ways to do that, I can't go into it, but all I can say to you is simply by focusing and bringing attention to your breath during the day and night, by just nasal breathing, whether you're walking, doing your warm-up, doing your cool-down, when you go to bed especially, breathe through your nose as often as possible, and that's just going to recalibrate your CO2 tolerance to start with, because what's destroyed that is our diet. We eat a lot of processed foods nowadays that are really acidic, and how do we get rid of that acidity in our body? It's through the breath. Carbon dioxide, known as carbonic acid, we want to exhale it. So when we have a really highly acidic food for, say, lunch or dinner, you'll probably notice, and I do because I pay attention to it, you start breathing through your mouth a little bit more because you're trying to expel some of that carbonic acid because you're trying to balance your pH. And the main way to balance your pH is through your breath. You can't really do it much through your diet. There's small changes, but through your breath is how we make a big difference there. So we're going to go into a little thing called crocodile breathing. I'll demonstrate it, and you can all do this, you're all on the floor. I just want you to focus on nasal breathing only. And what I want you to focus on is your belly pressing into the ground, okay? That's a bit of a feedback response there for us. So, and that's just to ensure that the sequence of our breath is not going up high and down, and it's actually starting down low. So the beauty of nature is that our lungs look like an inverted tree, basically. So the leaves of the tree are up high, the leaves of our lungs are down low. If you're breathing into a trunk of a tree, it's not doing a whole lot. If you breathe into the trunk of your lungs, it's also not doing a whole lot. So what we want to do is breathe low into our diaphragm, and a good way to sort of see if we're doing this is just to lie on our stomach like this. Just cross your hands over, And then all I want you to do, guys, is breathe through your nose slowly. And feel your ribs, your lower ribs especially, expanding outwards, because the floor's obviously pressing against your belly. Your back will raise up a little bit from the lower back, hopefully. And if you notice, I'll look around the room as you guys are breathing, so we'll do it for about 2 to 3 minutes and you'll feel really relaxed. But I'm also looking at whether or not your chest is raising before your lower back. So everyone just find some space. We're just going to go and practice the breathing.
Don't fall asleep, guys.
So just place one hand on top of the other, your forehead resting on your hands, feet together. And all I want you to do now is just place your forehead on your hands and start breathing through your nose. And I want you to try and breathe as not shallow. When I say shallow, I don't mean, I want you to breathe down into your diaphragm, but I want your volume of breath to be quite subtle. I shouldn't see too much movement. We don't want to take these big breaths, especially when we're at rest or we're trying to recover. Remember, we want to build up our CO2 tolerance. So generally in some other exercises, we'd be holding our breath and getting better at tolerating CO2. There's a place in our brain that basically makes us want to breathe, and it's the CO2 that stimulates that. So just take some nice breaths through your nose into your belly and try and feel your belly press against the floor. And think globally, so think 360. Belly into the floor, feel those lower ribs just sort of pushing out to the side a little bit, and your lower back raising. So you just want to place your hands on the floor there. Yeah, and just really relax through that. Yeah, good. And you'll find this is really relaxing, and I'll often get my clients to come in before they start a PT session and do this, because most of them have probably been in Sydney traffic, and that's pretty damn stressful. And I want my clients to be completely focused and ready to go. So I want all that stress and rubbish and what's in their head to go away, and I just want them to focus back onto the breath. Try and notice if your belly's getting the air or if your chest is getting the air. If your chest is getting the air, it's just something you need to practice a little bit. As I look around the room, you guys are all breathing pretty well. There seems to be most of the lower back. Some people don't look like they're moving at all, which is actually really good. It's actually really good. Remember, there's two things about breathing: the rate, how fast we're breathing, and the volume. And we want to decrease both of them as much as possible. And that's going to reset a CO2 tolerance to an extent. CO2 tolerance really has a massive effect on our VO2 max, which is our level of fitness and performance. A simple thing like this, and nasal breathing day and night, will improve your performance a lot. And it's so simple. Plus it will improve your mood. We control our emotion through our breath. We control our emotion through our breath. If you're feeling stressed or anything, see what happens when you take a few nasal breaths and just slowly exhaling. For those of you that may breathe through your mouth, every mouth breath is a release of cortisol, and cortisol is our stress hormone, as well as a bit of adrenaline at times as well, which will also make us stressed. So if you're breathing through your mouth daily, every breath, which can be up to 20,000 breaths, is a puff of stress. Every nasal breath is a little bit of relaxation. So just something to think about. If you have a dry mouth when you wake up in the middle of the night, it means you're probably breathing through your mouth. And that's really hard to recorrect, especially if you have any sort of blockage or anything in your nose. The other thing I want to mention about nasal breathing is the thing of nitric oxide. Probably find it in pre-workouts. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It's only released and made in our bodies, in our nasal cavity. So every mouth breath you miss out on that nitric oxide. But if you're breathing through your nose, you're also making your own little formulation of nitric oxide, which will help your performance. It will help your circulation. It will decrease blood pressure, cholesterol, plaque buildup, risk of heart attack, risk of stroke. It'll send more oxygen to your brain, you'll perform better, you won't be yawning as much, you won't be feeling as tired as much. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the breath. You guys can come up and sit back to where you were. You feel pretty relaxed after that? Should do. Yeah.